Did you pick the right music for your live streams? Using music when live streaming can help enhance your live streams and make them not only more engaging and more entertaining for your viewers. On this episode, Jim and I are going to sit down with Matt Schick on how to pick the right music for live streaming or how to decide if you have the right music for your live streams. So, Jim, it's fantastic seeing you again. I mean, this is episode 40 of the Launch Your Live podcast. I know we've got a great episode here with Matt today, so it's really good to have him on. But I'm going to go ahead and bring him on, and we can kick things off. So, Matt, thanks for joining us.
Hello, good morning. Thanks so much for having me.
Great to see you, Matt. And even though our podcast listeners can't see it, for those of you watching this on our interview series on YouTube, Matt is sporting an amazing StreamYard shirt, by the way. Just a little shout out to our friends.
Oh, nobody can see my Vanna White motion showing off the shirt. They're good, guys. They're good.
Yeah.
By the way, go ahead, Jim. Sorry.
No, I was going to say, we've gotten to know Matt through the StreamYard producers beta program, and Matt is an amazing guy. Really glad that he could join us today.
Thank you so much. Really a pleasure. I couldn't think of a better way of starting my morning off.
By the way, we got to get a copy of that background you have. I mean, I think that would make a great Zoom background. Great live video background for people that would have a green screen. So I like that.
Get it out. It's funny. I'm shooting into the corner. So I live in Manhattan. So, naturally, my wife and I are both working out of our 700 square foot apartment, which means if I turn my camera 2 degrees to the left, you see my bed. But we don't want to see that. So I turn it back. I get it perfectly out of frame. Now you're seeing the window, the gloomy New York behind me. And it's funny when I've done a couple of these video shows for StreamYard, and every time I even purchased a big green pop-up green screen I have in the background, and I'm like, I'm the guy who's usually behind the camera anyway, not in front of it. So why am I going to set up this green screen and have a background when I never normally would have that set up anyway? Again, I'm the guy lurking in the wings of the virtual curtain. So this is me. I'm not pretending to be someone I'm not. This is me in my little corner of my New York apartment.
Fantastic. I got to say, thanks a lot for joining us, for this episode. I'm going to go and kick things off. I mean, so I know I've chatted with you. I know Jim has chatted with you. But how did you get started in live streaming? What's your story? What's your background?
Sure. It's definitely not really a linear move. So I started out as a performer myself, actually. I was a magician from the time I was 10 years old to the time I was in college. Literally, I would perform. I remember going home. I went to school up in Boston, and I grew up in New Jersey. And I'd drive home from Boston to Jersey. And I'd perform 4 shows every weekend, 5 shows, drive right back up, and then continue all my classes. And it was how I made my living for many, many years. And coming into this production world as a performer is very helpful. We could talk a little bit more about that later. But in addition to performing, I always really loved the production side of things. When I was in high school, I produced these 2 very large benefit shows at my school's new theater. Both shows very fortunately sold out. We raised about $38,000 for a children's hospital of Philadelphia. So it was a really big victory for me. And not only did I get to perform and host the shows, and they featured magicians from across the world, from Las Vegas, from cruise ship performers, people, real pros who lead the industry. I also learned how to sell tickets, how to market, how to create a brand that people really could trust. So the second year when we did the show, we sold out in a month's time rather than 6 months' time. So I really loved production and I loved magic. And I went to school for business. And then after that, I went right to work on a television show as the magic producer for True TV's The Carbonaro Effect. And The Carbonaro Effect is a hidden camera magic show. It's run 5 seasons, over 115 episodes on True TV. And that allowed me to combine both of my loves, the magic and also production. And that was a very successful show. We also toured with a live version of that show. So I was the stage manager and producer of that show up until March when all of live got canceled. So literally, March, middle of March, I was getting calls that all of my work for the rest of the year was just completely getting shut down. There was no more live tour. There was no more television show for the time being. And instantly, my pretty well set up career of running this entire operation just came to a screeching halt. And, it was definitely frightening as it was for many of us, and wasn't really sure what to do next. And then I was watching a benefit show, which it was the Rosie O'Donnell show that they repurposed, and they did a live version on StreamYard. And that was for, I believe, the Actors Fund. It was a benefit in March or April. And I was just so blown away with their ability to really nicely produce a professional stream of famous actors and singers and other, random celebrities they threw into the mix. And I sat with my jaw open thinking, this is amazing, the fact that you can accomplish this in this new virtual world. And the rest really is history. I mean, the next day I went right into just learning everything I could about not only StreamYard, but how to produce, great, solid, well-branded and highly professional streams in Zoom and WebEx and other platforms. And since March, since that one catalyst of watching that show, I'm now at over 250 of these events for all sorts of companies and organizations and celebrities and public figures. And it's been interesting to say the least. If you were to tell me this time last year that I'd be sitting at my desk, last year I flew 100 flights exactly. December 31st, I hit my 100th flight. I was on the road over 300 days. And I was saying, I really need to stay at home a little bit more next year. Well, I got my wish. So never would have believed you if you told me that I'd be just doing everything from my, the corner of my New York apartment. But here we are.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I know for me too, that's when I really went from being in front of the camera, which I still am a lot, and Christian and I also do his show Social Chatter, but being behind the camera, so to speak, from my proverbial basement. It's amazing what this technology lets us do. You got an amazing background, and so why? And so I think this is where you're really qualified to talk about this. Why is picking the right music so important for your live streams?
Sure. Thank you. Yeah. So here's where we're at currently. So there's a lot of great ways to produce great streams that are engaging in this new virtual world. The problem is most people still aren't doing that. So we're left with this condition where we're just all so saturated with screens. We're staring at screens all day long with meetings and family get-togethers and family holidays, and we're laying in bed scrolling on Instagram and watching videos of our favorite influencers. So we're just constantly looking at this stuff, and it's getting old. I mean, Zoom fatigue was a real thing back in May, and here we are in nearly December, and it's a problem. So the ability to add something that changes up the rhythm of people's days is very important. So they're used to just watching, talking, and listening to talking, and hearing people talk at them. So in order to change, in the performing world, when you're building a stage show, it's really important to have ebbs and flows. So you have, not just the same tonality the entire time. It wakes people up. It just, it gets people, gets their juices re-energized. So it's really important to do that, and music is a great way of doing so, where it just keeps the energy moving along, and it takes it from being just a monotonous talking, which people are just hearing all day, and adds a little bit of levity in some cases, excitement in other cases, but most importantly, just a tone that you get to create with music.
Mm-hmm. So obviously, picking the right music, very important. I love the ebbs and the flows, you talk about there. So, are there times where people shouldn't use music on their live streams? Or is there certain times where, you should use maybe just an intro, and then continue that throughout your stream and have an outro that goes with it? Or should you have a sound bed that goes, plays throughout, it's the same? Or are there times where you shouldn't use any music?
Those are all great questions. Yes, for sure. You don't want to overdo it. With music, a little goes a long way, especially when it's very delicate, right? Like, we're talking and we are the feature. So right now, if I were to play a song that overpowered us and you couldn't hear what I was saying or what you were saying, Christian, it would be, it would degrade the performance, not enhance the performance, because, and I say performance because that's my background, the podcast. So, the ability to hear your speaker, your presenter is of utmost importance. Below that, having a nice music that sets the tone for what exactly is going on at the same time is very helpful. So a fun example that I always use, and it sounds silly, but if you try it, you'll really see how effective it is. Just like film a video on your phone of your wife or your husband or a child walking to the mailbox, right? And that's all you need, right? Them walking out to the mailbox to get the mail. If you put a sad, slow, cinematic song behind that, this thing becomes a tearjerker. I mean, if you put it in black and white, forget about it. You've lost your audience. But it really can set the tone for it. Just fills in the blanks and paints a story that video only cannot do. Now, if you put upbeat, peppy music to that, now it's a story of your daughter going to get the mail. She's excited for a package to come and wants to see if it's there. And that music change alone, without changing speed or the way it's shot or anything else, that music can completely repaint that picture for you. So it's very important. It's very nice if you're talking about something very serious, maybe music isn't the way to go. If you're talking about something with some comedic levity, something a little more, kind of upbeat and comical would really help accentuate that. It really depends on what the stream is, what the run of show is, when to use it, when not. You mentioned a couple different, use case studies, I should say. So there's what's called a music bed. Music bed is music that literally lays underneath, or I say you lay on top of the music, just like you'd sleep in a bed. So the music is underneath you, just like a bed's underneath you when you're sleeping. So it's music that's pretty low in the background. You still hear the music. There's typically no lyrics. It's like an instrumental ambient sound that, again, creates that mood as you're talking. And that can go if there's like a long period of speaking, or let's say you're demonstrating something or sharing a screen, and you want to just fill it in and just make it a little more interesting. That's a really great use study for a music bed. There's also what's called stingers or stings, or some people in the industry call them bumpers, and that can be like up next we've got a really great guest. It's Adam from Shark Tank, and that's your stinger. Just a bit of just an energy jolt. So again, people have listened to you for 10 minutes, and you've got a fun jingle or sting that comes in, maybe one that you use throughout the entire show, so people are used to that. It's on brand for you. Music's a great way to establish a brand and stick to it. Maybe it's a jazz sting that you use throughout the entire event. Maybe at the beginning and the end, you've got a prolonged jazz intro and outro, and it just ties it all together into a nice cohesive package. So yeah, there's a lot of great ways of using it. Overdoing it is definitely something you don't want to do. So it's just really important to make sure that you're picking music at the right time and making strategic choices.
And along those lines too, though, do you think that sometimes people are like, you hear a lot of times like, oh, I want to play all this music, and then their stuff's getting taken down, and it's almost like they feel like if they can't have music, they're like somehow doomed. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, it's a very good point. If you're not aware, I'm glad you brought it up, Jim, because you can't just play music that you're not licensed to use. And what is that? Pretty much everything you've ever heard before. I mean, if you listen to the radio, every single track you've ever heard on the radio is owned by another entity, a record label or an artist. When we used to do our live show in theaters, there are two organizations you pay rights to. There's ASCAP and there's BMI, and those organizations essentially pay these blanket costs, and it covers your ability to play those tracks in a theater. So currently, there's no real way where that translates super well to live, because if you're streaming to YouTube, how does YouTube know that you paid for the rights to a Mariah Carey song? They don't. In fact, there's been funny stories of actual artists who play their own materials. Clearly, they're licensed. They, in many cases, own it, and their streams are getting pulled down because sites like YouTube and Facebook and Pinterest and what's Twitter? Periscope, rather, not Pinterest.
No live video there yet.
No live video at Pinterest yet. These sites have robo scanners that automatically will detect copywritten material, whether it's video or audio. So they can, in many cases, just pull your stream down altogether because they think you're using it without permission. Or in many cases, a lot of us are trying to monetize our streams. So they say, hey, you're not allowed to make money off of this other person's content. So naturally, they pull your stream down. And that can be devastating if you're a live stream producer or a live stream host of your own show. To have your stream get pulled down is certainly very frightening. So you have to do it the right way. And there are quite a few right ways of doing it. So while you can't play, again, a Whitney Houston or Lady Gaga song, because those are obviously owned by their respective record labels, you can play other types of music. There's public domain music and there's royalty-free music. So public domain music is basically a library of music that, again, no one owns. Basically, it's used for public. I believe it's 1917 is the year where anything before that year, songs such as Happy Birthday, for example, anything was released before that are public domain. So you can use it anywhere. No one owns the rights to this, and you will not get dinged. YouTube would never pull your stream down, etc. So you're certainly allowed to do that. The wider umbrella or portfolio of music that you can use, because you're a little limited with public domain, is what's called royalty-free music. And this is music that's been created for the sole purpose of being used by content creators. So in many cases, royalty-free doesn't mean that it's free, although there are certain free royalty-free websites. But royalty-free basically means you are allowed to purchase the rights to then use this music. And typically you purchase the rights one time, and now you have access to use the music. And while YouTube still doesn't know, it's not like somebody's telling YouTube, oh, Matt Schick in New York purchased the rights to Jiffy Pop 180, which is a song I just created. Good morning, everyone. YouTube doesn't know that, but what YouTube does know is that Jiffy Pop 180 is a royalty-free song that they won't flag or pull down. So when I buy the rights through a website, and we could talk about what websites I like to use, but when you buy the rights to those websites, essentially I now get the track in full quality without any audio watermark, and I can use that without it being pulled down of my stream. So, and there are many different sites you can use for that. I mean, one I use all the time just because I do a lot of streaming for people on YouTube and I do a lot of ambient music. YouTube has their own royalty-free audio library. If you just search YouTube audio library, there's access to thousands of tracks that are being updated every single day. There's literally a giant library. And the best part about this is you can search by mood, by genre, I believe by pace. So if you're really looking for something cinematic and sad, you can just literally check the cinematic box. If you're looking for something ambient, there's an ambient box, there's instrumental, and it just really helps you hone in exactly what type of music you're looking for. Now, this is all free music, so some of it is better than others, but it's a really great wealth. It's certainly a great spot to start when you're looking for music since it is completely free. Another site that's used by a lot of professionals, video editors, professional producers, even TV projects, is a site called Pond, Pond 5. And Pond 5 is a much more premium site. You can purchase songs. Some of them are $6, some of them are $200, depending on what the song is, how popular it is, what the artist decided that they wanted to sell it for, etc. But there are, again, thousands of options on Pond 5 with really great, robust search categories, just like I mentioned with YouTube. Another website is bensound.com. There's tons of them out there. If you just go to royalty-free music websites, you can find these giant libraries, and you're, again, allowed to use any of this. You buy it, you'll pay a one-time fee. I'd say on average, $15, $20 for a royalty-free track is pretty on par with what you would pay, and you have that forever now. You can add that to your own library, and now when you're producing 2 years from now, you've got a library of 30, 50 songs in your computer that you can pull from and reuse again for different streams. So it's definitely a great worthwhile investment.
So as far as... Go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, so now, even though you have that, though, don't you still potentially run into that problem of you own the music, just like you said earlier? Have you run into where you've had to go back to, whether it's Facebook or YouTube, and say, look, we own this music, you shouldn't have to pull it down, and then they reinstate you, or has that been a process?
I've never had that issue with royalty free, only with copywritten music. And you could tell because when you send something to YouTube, it'll automatically, I'll often do a test just to make sure there's no issues in advance. So I'll run all the content, video, and audio through YouTube or Facebook and see if anything gets flagged. I don't recall with royalty free anything ever getting flagged. Where again, if I use anything at all, even if it's like 4 seconds from a TV show or something. A good example, I worked with the performer Michael Carbonaro I mentioned, who has the Carbonaro Effect on True TV. He's a great buddy of mine, and we produced that show together. And he was doing a Q&A for kids at a local at a high school at the beginning of the pandemic, and he showed one of his clips. And we didn't get removed, but afterwards we got a slap on the wrist from YouTube. I'm like, this guy owns this content. He created this content. But again, they don't know that. There's no way of writing YouTube and telling them that you're licensed for it. I mean, there are ways, but it's not effective for normal streamers like you and me. So So again, royalty free has been the nice savior. I use it all the time now. It's just it's very reliable. If you're trying to monetize your streams, which many people are, forget about it. You can't even if you use a couple seconds of anything at all, you'll either have your monetization turned off or it'll be suspended, or again, your stream can just completely be shut off without any notice, which obviously is a tragedy for people who this is their business. This is what they do.
So I just have a couple of quick questions in regards to, so, on YouTube, you get a couple of copyright strikes. So I'd say probably people should test at the beginning to make sure they're not going to, maybe you'll get a strike at the beginning, for example, but use that almost as a lesson to help you moving forward, I think. And then the other part also that I think is really important to highlight, or at least the question I had is, so if somebody bought, for example, royalty-free music, are they allowed to use that over and over and over, or is it a one-time use thing?
Typically, it's over and over and over. When you buy the rights to royalty-free music, there's typically different levels of rights. Just like if you were to buy a graphic, you can potentially buy a graphic to use for your own website. Once you start using that graphic to then put on merch and sell to other people, then you got to obviously purchase for much higher enhanced license. So same thing with the music. Typically, there's 2 or 3 different versions that just allow for different uses, and you just read that contract carefully. Most of the time, however, you do buy it, and you have the rights to use that wherever you'd like, whenever you'd like. It's just I guess wherever isn't correct. Whenever you'd like, within the confines of where the contract says you're allowed to. So. Again, Pond5 and Ben Sound and those websites will really clearly spell out what type of license you're purchasing and where you're allowed to use it.
So I had one last question for you, and it's the fact that you said, hey, you tested some of these things before you publish them. So are there any specific tools that you used to do this? Does YouTube or Facebook have a tool where you could maybe run it through it? For example, I know they have a debugging tool, for example, for testing out blog images and seeing what comes up on Facebook and so forth. But are there any tools for checking the copyright?
There may be, not that I know of offhand. Honestly, what I would do is so they're typically a producer for other people. So again, I'm never the guy on screen. This is a rare occurrence for me this morning. So what I typically do is I'm typically streaming to a client's YouTube or Facebook, or in many cases it's corporate, and we're going to these big platforms like Hopin, for example, where there's not even like a platform. It's closed circuit essentially. So you don't have to worry about these things. You're still not allowed to use copyrighted music, but there's no robo scanner that pulls your stream down in those cases. So when I'm going to YouTube or to Facebook, what I typically do is, it's a new client, most of the time anyway, or a new account rather. So once I get everything plugged in and I get my, my broadcast studio, StreamYard talking to the platform, I essentially will just do an unlisted private stream, and I'll just run through all the assets anyway. And this checks 2 things. It checks my ability to actually stream to their destination with no hiccups or issues, and it also checks the ability to play the content that I'm, planning and playing, and making sure there's no issues there. I used to do this all the time when I started live streaming back in April and May. And again, once I started using royalty free, there's never anything that would ever pop up. So I don't really do it too much anymore. It's been pretty reliable for me. Also, my clients typically don't monetize their streams. So, in some cases, if they do insist on using a song that is copywritten, I give them I read them the riot act. I let them know that it's very likely their stream can be pulled down. Since they're not monetizing it anyway, we'll get a flag afterwards that says, YouTube has detected copywritten content in your stream. For this reason, we cannot monetize it, but your account is still in good standing. So that's been nice as well. It's still a bit scary not knowing when they decide to just pull your stream down versus when they decide to just give you a kind warning like that. So again, I recommend all my clients always go the royalty-free route. I just don't like messing around and taking the risk. It's not worth it to have a couple lyrics of something we're familiar with. Typically, it's only a few seconds of music anyway, because like we said earlier, you don't want to overpower the speaker. So good rule to follow is just to play by the rules, use royalty-free content, and just test everything if you have even the slightest worry that something you have isn't kosher.
Fantastic. And as far as picking the right music, just can you give just a quick summary on that, like how people can go about whether they choose action, suspense, when to add music and so forth.
Exactly. Yeah. It really depends completely on what your stream is. So if you're doing if you have a murder mystery show that you're streaming out, that's a time when you really want some suspenseful music in the background, something that's just that makes us feel like if we turn the corner, we're getting close to discovering who the murderer is and putting our finger on it. So it's hard to really just demonstrate other than think about what you're streaming. Think about what you want people to feel while you're streaming, and then find music that, without you saying anything, paints that same picture, that same feeling, conveys that same message. And now when you add you back into the equation, you're accentuating the music and you're just helping tie everything together. So just be careful, don't be tone deaf. It's if you're streaming a funeral, which I'm sure someone out there streams funerals. I'm sorry if you're that person, but that doesn't sound like an easy job. Obviously, you don't want a peppy, upbeat music in the background of a funeral. I think that would be instantly the joke of the funeral business. So, yeah, you want something more somber, a little slow, something that is very perhaps there's some string instruments that just that isn't you don't want brass in a funeral. You know what I'm saying? So just use what use what you're used to hearing in commercials. Let's turn the TV on and watch commercials for a few minutes. Every commercial has music behind it. Listen to any pharmaceutical commercial, and they paint this picture of somebody who's really suffering through life. There's this slow music that really tugs on your heartstrings until they found Lenestra, whatever the drug is. And then suddenly everything changes. The tone completely changes. It takes a 180. The music's now more upbeat. It's faster. There's now color on the screen. The subject is smiling. So that's a great example. I mean, I'd say look at your commercials, see how they do it, and then try to emulate what they do by finding music that fills in those blanks for you. Is Lenestra even a drug? I don't even know. It sounds like fun.
Sounds like one, right? Or we'll make one up, right?
Yeah.
Now this has been great stuff, Matt. So Matt, what's the best place where our viewers and listeners can connect with you? I know you also offer remote production services for people as well. Where's the best place for them to reach out to you?
That's great. Thanks, Jim. Yeah, I it's funny that the last few months have just been a total whirlwind of this, this business just kind of exploding for anyone in live production. So I'm a bit behind the eight ball, to be honest with you, and setting up a great platform where people can reach out, just because it's kind of been nonstop without it. So I'm at the point where, my team is expanding and I'm getting close. So for now, the best way of reaching out to me is runmystream.com. That leads to a form where you can fill in information about what you're trying to accomplish, who your audience is, what your event entails, and then I reach right back out to you immediately. We start talking about the best way to utilize my services as a producer, and bring your vision to life. Obviously, people are used to these days, just watching events that are plagued with technical issues, or the old "we can't hear you, please unmute." I mean, all sorts of issues we're just used to all day long. So the bar for production is pretty low, unfortunately, for virtual. Even now, when we're months into this pandemic, where there is no other way of communicating than through our screen. So, I think that I offer value to my clients coming from the world of production and also performing. And as a performer, there's a lot of things that that you wouldn't ordinarily understand as well if you're just a producer. When you're on stage and you're introducing the next performer in a show, that performer better be waiting in the wings. There better be music that comes in as that walk, which could be very awkward, where you cross and shake hands and transition. That blank needs to be filled in. So just things like that, knowing that the next three presenters are on, we see them, we hear them. We're troubleshooting issues 10 minutes, 15 minutes in advance of when they'd have to happen. Things that you just know as a performer who has been in that light and knows the stress of being on stage by themselves and not having the support around them is really important. So I think that it's been really fun for me to work with clients of all different shapes and sizes. Fortune 500 companies and politicians and really everything in between, and taking that experience both as a performer and a producer, meshing them together. And if you are looking for a stream to be produced, I hope we connect. I really love doing this stuff. It's great meeting new people like both of you, and it's been a really really amazing way of kind of taking what I know and still being able to work on these things during this time when so many are out of work because entertainment and live events as a whole have come to a screeching halt.
Fantastic. So I want to thank everyone for joining us for episode 40 of the Launch Your Live podcast. On this episode, we discussed how to pick the right music for live streaming with Matt Schick. You shared some amazing tips on both, picking the types of music, some places you can also find music. And I also like the fact that you talked about, royalty-free, music and ASCAP and all that other stuff as well, because I think that's really important for people to know, and to realize that, you can't just go pick the music you hear on the radio. And it may not be exactly what you want, but you have to make it work unless you want to actually pay for the license. So, but remember, if you have questions on this particular episode, you can go to launcher.live/EP40. And if you also have any other live streaming questions, don't be hesitant to reach out to us for a consultation on our Facebook page at Launcher Live. We will see you all on a future episode. Thanks a lot for tuning in. Bye, everyone.